Hi, I'm Garrett from Making Movies, and I want to talk about how to use the light panels to properly light a green screen. For the video that we shot, we wanted to give it a very neon and retro vibe, knowing that we were going to do a lot of post effects on it. After the fact, we wanted to make sure that we got as clean of a key in the initial shooting as possible. There is a lot that goes into proper compositing with green screen footage, but the general rule of thumb is the better you can light on the front end during production, the easier time you will have on the back end. While in this video we are going to focus most of our conversation on the lighting techniques for green screen, there are a few things to keep in mind when it comes to your camera. First is the bit depth. The more colors your camera can record, the better time you're going to have compositing green screen footage. So 8-bit, or what primarily comes on most of your entry-level DSLR mirrorless cameras and such, is not going to give you as good quality of footage as something in 10-bit, 12-bit, and so on. The last two things to keep in mind are your aperture and your shutter angle or shutter speed. Blur is the absolute worst thing to have in green screen, and if we can avoid blur, whether that's our depth of field or motion blur, that is going to help give us the crispiest images possible. So overcrank your shutter speed or shutter angle to remove motion blur, and close down your aperture to a point where what you're focusing on is entirely in focus, having a deep depth of field versus a shallow depth of field. Now that we got a couple of the basic camera things out of the way, let's now talk about lighting. When it comes to lighting, regardless of what your foreground stylization is, your cyc wall, your background, the actual green screen component of it, needs to be as evenly lit as possible. If your light isn't even behind you, you're going to have hot spots and you're going to have dark spots. And that is going to make keying much, much more difficult, because if we're keying to the neutral green in the middle, our dynamic range might be too narrow for us to properly key things out. Having a large, bright, soft light is going to ensure that there is good even spread across our background, something that these Gemini 2x1s excel at. Once we have that nice, soft, even background, we can then focus on our foreground. When it comes to lighting your foreground, before we even set up a single light, the first thing we need to do is to make sure that there is enough separation between our background and our foreground. If you are too close to the background, you're going to cast shadows, and also you're going to get a lot of spill coming forward onto your subject off of the wall. So when thinking about the size of a green screen that you're going to be using, it's not just measured in feet horizontally, you also need to think about it in terms of depth. How far away do you need to be, and how does that distance then affect the amount of coverage that you're getting with that green screen? Now that we have the proper distance between our foreground and background, we're not going to be able to eliminate all spill. There is still going to be some light that's coming from our background projected onto our foreground, because that's how light works. To combat that, we now need to account for that spill, or block that spill off. And we can do that a number of ways, but primarily we use flags. The positioning of these flags, whether they are on stands or they're blankets on the floor or they're curtains that you pull around, is going to entirely depend on the shot type and the subject matter of that shot. But strategically placing these flags where it's not going to impede the movement of your subject, but still will eliminate spill, is going to greatly affect your ability to chroma key those out later. Understandably, not everybody has access to a green screen studio, cyclorama, etc. And that's one of the places that this light can really shine. I'll show you. I've dimmed the studio lights a little bit because, of course, we just talked about proper distance, and I'm obviously not the proper distance from this. So I turned the studio lights down so you could see what I'm talking about. But these Gemini lights are full RGB WW lights, meaning that we have the ability to project any color that we want. So if you don't have access to a studio cyc or a green screen studio wall, you do have the ability to just plug in a color. So in this case, green and also blue. So depending on the needs that you have the ability to, in effect, take any white wall and create a green screen out of it. And that's really it. Those are the basic tips and tricks. Soft, even lighting for your backgrounds, separating your foregrounds from those backgrounds, and flagging off any unnecessary spill. From there, you can get as creative as you want with the way that you light your foreground, because you know that however you light that person, you're going to have a perfect key every time. I hope you found this video helpful, and if you did, stick around. We're doing more videos about how to utilize the Gemini 2x1 to achieve some really incredible lighting effects. Again, I'm Garrett from Making Movies. Thanks for watching.